Greece, 5th century BC. Over the course of 3 decades, a city and its people, led by one man, rise to greatness. This is Athens, the birthplace of democracy. But it is Pericles' city.
Pericles decided that the best way to leave an indelible mark on posterity was to completely alter the skyline and appearance of the centre of his city, Athens.
Pericles builds impregnable fortifications. The first Senate house. A complex network of pipes to supply his people with fresh water. The most powerful navy in the ancient world. And temples. One of them, the Parthenon, would be hailed by many as the most perfect building ever completed.
I think he did have a vision for what Athens should be, and seemed to follow that vision for most of his life.
After 2,500 years, the lost world of Pericles can come to life again. Athens, the greatest city on earth. In the 5th century BC, from the hundreds of competing states that made up ancient Greece, one man led his city to greatness. The city was Athens, and Pericles was not a king or prince, but an elected leader. His power came from the people and his own single vision.
The story goes that when Pericles' mother was 8 months pregnant with him, she knew that she was going to have an extraordinary son who was destined for greatness because she had a dream that she gave birth to a lion. And for the ancient Greeks, the lion was always a symbol of leadership.
To be a successful politician and statesman in Greece, he needed to be a military leader, and he needed to be an effective speaker in the assembly. And he was clearly both of those. Pericles not only contributed to Athens becoming a leading power, I think he was the main creator of that power.
Pericles would send out a message to the world that Athens was supreme, the capital of a new empire. He would deliver the message by building. What he planned would be the most costly and ambitious construction campaign undertaken in the Western world. But he needed to fund it. In what some considered an act of blatant theft, he raided the Greek treasury. Money which should have been used to defend all the city-states in the region was diverted to the glorification of his own city. Work soon began on the Parthenon. Built to honor the goddess Athena, it would become the most imitated building in history, an inspiration to engineers and architects. It would take 8 years to build, cost the equivalent of $100 million, and use a staggering 20,000 tons of the finest marble.
The Parthenon is arguably the most influential building in world history. You cannot go into any city in North America or Europe, or indeed most of the world, without finding a 19th century bank facade, parliamentary building facade, or law court building that isn't in some way influenced by the Parthenon.
The Parthenon is a very special building because of the visual impact it has on you. When you go up there, it's first of all huge. Solid marble, there's not a straight line in it, so that it has a lightness and a sense of movement. When you stand on the Acropolis and look at it, it seems almost afloat.
The image of the Parthenon is familiar to us, but 25 centuries of war, weather, and history have reduced this building to a shadow of what it once was. Engineer Ed McCann and architect Manolis Koras have set themselves the task of working out exactly how it came to be built, what it looked like during Athens' golden age. Pericles' men quarried the marble for the Parthenon from the nearby mountain of Penteli. The team restoring the temple today get their marble from the same place. What seems laborious, even with the aid of modern technology, would have taken months in Pericles' time. First, the marble was chiseled by hand from the rock and examined for faults. Then the business of transportation began.
It was a 10-mile journey, and they brought 20,000 tons of marble blocks with just teams of oxen and rollers, this incredibly long journey all the way up the steep Acropolis to get it there. This is an astonishing feat. It would be an astonishing feat today with proper cars and so on.
The most difficult part of the journey was the last part, moving the marble up a 302-foot slope. Ed McCann has discovered the ingenious technique that the masons used for lifting.
They had a very cunning system for getting the rocks up to the top. And what they did was they set up, they had a cart on one side with the rock on it, and up the top on the other side they have another cart full of stone with a big rope going round and over a giant pulley wheel. And then they set up the donkeys and the people all pulling down. And so they pull down and lift the rock up. And then at the top they're able to unload it, and then they bring the horses up here, they put a rock on that side and they bring it back up and down like that. So it's a counterbalance system.
The enormity of the challenge becomes even more impressive when Ed and Manolis calculate the weight of the marble. The individual blocks were vast.
So they had 8 cranes dotted around the Parthenon, and these were timber cranes, and they lifted these pieces up into the construction, and the biggest piece was 13 tons. So about
the biggest 8 pieces weighing 13 tons each.
Capable of hoisting a 13-ton column, the cranes were also very simple in design. 2 wooden beams were connected by an iron bracket, and ropes were passed through a pulley block at one end. 200 men were employed on the site itself, but around the city thousands more supported them. Masons, moulders, founders, rope makers, transporters.
Manolis, are these the original pick holes?
Exactly. Second stage after bringing the stone from the quarry. It is one of the preliminary stages.
But the last time someone put their finger in there might have been 2,500 years ago.
Exactly.
With a pick.
Once the marble was in place, skilled masons began carving. Ed decides to have a go himself.
The key principle that underlies working the stone is working from doing rough cuts with the stone through to gradually getting to finer and finer stone cuts. And that's reflected in the tools that they use. So that the tool that they used for rough cutting was this double pick. It's difficult to lift and it's difficult to aim. I'm reliably informed that if you were any good with this, I could move 200 kilos, that's about twice as much as I weigh, in an hour's work with one of these. Now, as you got into the stone and you needed to get finer and finer, you needed to use ever smaller tools. And I can put them exactly onto the bit of stone I want to hit, to the nearest millimetre. It's much, much easier to use, and I can't really go too far wrong. But of course, I don't get very much off with this. It would take me 2 weeks chiseling away, basically reducing the marble to dust before I'd move 200 kilograms.
Once the columns and drums had been finished, they needed to be fitted together.
So this is where the original stones were put together, and these were iron clamps.
Exactly. The clamp is missing, but you see the bed of the original construction.
And this would have been underneath, so you wouldn't have seen it.
Always.
So underneath the
Yes,
bottom of the
exactly.
column.
Hidden by the next course, yes.
I see. Okay.
Today, damage from pollution means that the Parthenon needs extensive restoration. As Ed tries to puzzle out how the stones were originally put together all those centuries ago, he gets to see the work that's being carried out now.
This is the modern restoration work that is going on. And although it's different to what they did in Periclean times, there are some similarities. I mean, first of all, the column drums themselves are the same, and they're lifted up, in this case, by a great big iron and steel crane. In those days, it would have been a timber one. And you can see in the middle there a little metal spigot sticking up. Nowadays, it's made out of titanium, but in Periclean times, that would have been wood. and that's what helps you to centre this thing. So when you lower it in with a crane, there's a little hole, and you line them up, and then you know you're exactly centred up.
Each wall, each column, is evidence of extraordinary skill. The stones are perfectly positioned and seamlessly joined.
You see one of the best preserved joints in the Parthenon, because this column was never destroyed by any event like bombardment or earthquake.
Yeah, these joints, you couldn't get a piece of paper in there, could you?
The outer structure required 46 of these 13-ton columns. The result was a building of unparalleled grandeur,